Namaskara and a very warm welcome to the Rashtriya Hathkarga Divas Utsav at NIFT Bangalore. Hope you all had a good Sunday lunch. Back to the topic again, it's handloom sector, its issues with sustainability, technology and innovation. The panel will deliberate into the innovative, sustainable and technology upgradation in the sector while consciously retaining the human touch, the USP of ethic designs and the eco-friendly processes. It's a pleasure to introduce you to the panel members of today's session. We have with us Dr. Praveer Jana, Ms. Rashmi Bharti, Ms. Hema Ramakrishnan, and Ms. Shailini Seth Amin. Dr. Praveer Jana, professor at Department of Fashion Technology, currently the Shahi Chair Professor, Industry 4.0 at National Institute of Fashion Technology, India. With 3 decades of experience behind him, he is visionary in development, application, and management of smart technology in textile and apparel manufacturing. Having 4 patents and 15 books and book chapters in his name, Jana is a prolific contributor of technology columns in various apparel industrial journals and invited speakers in various national and international conferences. Professor Jana is a graduate of textile technology from Calcutta University, a postgraduate in garment manufacturing technology from and a PhD from Nottingham Trent University. Our next panel speaker, Ms. Rashmi Bharti, has been working in the field of rural development for the past 28 years in Uttarakhand and Orissa. She co-founded Avani, a voluntary organization in the Central Himalayas. Of Janaki Devi Bajaj Award for Rural Entrepreneurship and Women's Empowerment. She, together with her husband, have also received the T.N. Pushu Award for Conservation and Livelihoods. She has also received the Nari Sakti Award for Avani's work with women empowerment, presented by the Honorable President of India, Sri Ramnath Kovind, in 2018. Rashmi has founded a sustainable rural enterprise named Kumaon Earthcraft Self-Reliant Cooperative that revives the traditional skill of hand spinning, hand weaving, and the art of natural dyeing. She has pioneered the cultivation of indigo pigment from the 3 varieties of indigo in the Central Himalayas. She's also innovated 100% beeswax crayon. Her work brings together the concept of creativity, sustainability, and design thinking that integrates people and natural resources in a contiguous whole. Coming to next, Ms. Hema Ramakrishnan is the Director Operation Khalom India Private Limited. She has a BTech degree in textiles and postgraduate diploma in management. She is a recipient of 3 gold and 3 silver medals for textile engineering. She is also the recipient of Women Achievement Award from FKCCI 2019. Khalom is a social and environmental startup where sustainable and recycled yarns are woven on handlooms. Khalom is upcycling waste into high-end product, usually a culturally ingrained and zero-emission technique. Currently, she's also working as a consultant. She also owns a design studio where textile designs are created for weaving, printing, embroidery for the export market. Our next speaker we have is Ms. Shailini Seth Amin, a founder and CEO of Moral Fiber based in Gujarat to promote hand-spun, hand-woven, quality, almost carbon neutral, allergy-free, khadi fabrics in India and abroad. Moral Fiber now, a very reputed and successful brand, works with cotton, silk, wool, and innovative blends, including organic cotton. They also provide high-level bespoke design, dyeing, printing, tailoring services to Indian and international buyers. Moral Fiber is a member of Fair Trade Forum India, a part of World Trade Organization. Shailini is an architect, community project initiator, and a financial consultant. She has worked in many national and international design and research projects, on board of several charities and is a successful business person, writer, and a speaker. Welcome one and all here, and welcome audience. And so we start a session here. As we know, there can never be a better day than to ponder on the fact that in 95% of the world's hand-woven fabric, but only 15% of fabric production in India is from handloom sector. How can we save this heritage? Take it to a level where handloom and handcrafts becomes a part of our everyday wardrobe? Is socio-technical change the answer of traditional handloom weavers? Jana sir, I would like to call in you here to understand the dilemma between artisanal and industrial approach in the handloom sector.
Okay. I think in the thank let's say it's our own program though, but I think probably thank that I have been drawn into handloom because a lot of my contacts are actually from the last 2 days asking what are you doing in handloom, because we don't have expertise in handloom. We were a pure technology guy. Because when I whether I've given a chance, and this is a very dicey, let's say topic in terms of this artisanal versus industrial. Now, can this coexist and how it should coexist, and those kind of dilemma. And before I think just getting into that, I think if we actually understand what are the challenges. Now, basically in the handloom or in any craft for that sake, because today is a handloom, so we're looking at the textile sector of the craft. Now, what the challenges are basically, first, slow production. So the production is less because of the low production. And then second is the survival crisis, because most of the cases we have a scenario that next generation is not interested in taking up. We'll come to that why the new generation is not interested in taking up, but that's a challenge. Then the third challenge is, I think, the authenticity, because how do you say that what is real handloom and what is or counterfeit product? I think these three aspects, if we can check and if we can address, then probably to a certain extent we'll be able to find out the answer. Now, first, let's say low production. I would like to say that low production is not a challenge. Probably if we take this, the flip side, if we say, so we'll say that we will not produce more than this. How or why these luxury goods are luxury? Because they produce in limited quantity. So we take it as, and I think this is not my idea I am not going to take this credit of this concept, because I think before me, Dr. Panda, who was our secretary, also has actually said that I think there is a lot of, let's say, merit in that concept. And we should say that we should produce only limited. We should not try to produce more and compete with industrial. So that's should not be first approach. So I think all these cases, we should say that yes, low production should be taken as an advantage rather than disadvantage. Because otherwise we can't, the moment we try to, because we'll discuss obviously in the later stage about technology, the moment we try to let's say pump up the production, then it may not remain as artisanal. It will convert to industrial, and then it will lose its let's say value. So if we can keep it as a limited production, as a handmade, so it is limited, and then I will charge higher prices, and there are people for doing that or buying that. Second is that, okay, now even if I say that it is a handloom and so and so and so, there is a big tag attached to it, then still there is a doubt when somebody is buying. How do I trust? This is a big issue in terms of counterfeiting and transparency or whatever solutions, which are one of the probably most common solutions which people are trying to let's say address nowadays with blockchain. I will say there are better solutions than that. Now, there are two very, very important technological solutions which are trying to address this in terms of two things. One, the fiber authenticity. That means if I'm saying it is wool and it is merino wool, how do a consumer know that it is merino wool? either I need to trust the brand, or do I have a technology to test? And for I think probably some of you probably aware, some if you may not aware, lot of this milk supply nowadays, which says country milk or A2 cow milk, and all this, whether you call luxury milk or whatever, which is at a cost, and they also give you a tester. I don't know whether you aware or not. So actually you can test that whether how much is water content or whatever. See, this technology is going to take, which is going to actually uplift us. And there are technologies where actually a retailer can put a small, let's say, mobile kind of device. You can put it on your garment, on your whatever. Either is a stall, it is a garment, and it will tell you that it is 100% cotton, or it is, let's say 100% merino wool, or it is alpaca, or whatever it is. You don't need to go for destructive testing. So that probably will address the certain issue of authenticity. There are also much bigger, let's say, technology available where we can do DNA marking. That means during the, which probably will address the recycling product, because the panelists here are, and that is one of the, let's say, approach what people are taking for, let's say, circularity or sustainability, because cotton is cotton. Now, in some cases, technology will not be able to distinguish between a virgin cotton and a circular cotton, because molecular wise, both are same. But again, there is a technology available which is called DNA marking, so which will be able to tell, yes, it is a recycled cotton. I'm not trusting the brand. I am actually testing in front of my eye. There is a tester which will be able to tell, yes, this is. So that way, probably authenticity can be addressed. And then probably the survival crisis will automatically probably get addressed if these two issues can be taken care. Because why there is a survival crisis? Because of low productivity and low value actual the craftsmen are getting are very low value. That probably to a certain extent is addressed because of this e-commerce. So all these middlemen are probably nowadays getting little marginalized. So they are getting higher value because there is a direct contact between this e-commerce platforms and the craftsmen, which are possible. There is not very, let's say, rocket science is there, which is already proven. So now then, once these are established, probably people will feel proud that yes, I am producing for a cluster where, and there will be a lot of earning. So there are only two issues. One is the social acceptance and the price or the earning. These two actually decides the survival. So once these two are there, I think survival crisis will going to go. These are aware. There are also some challenges which we are not aware. Like people do not know in the probably, because generally all these handloom clusters, or for that sake any craft clusters, are generally in the pristine areas of our country, generally, because it's not in the middle of the city or nowhere. So what is happening, they are doing good business, but they're dying using a process which is probably polluting some, let's say, water streams nearby. So there will be always hue and cry. We'll discuss that probably in the later stage of this discussion. So I feel this artisanal and industrial should be addressed, that we should live luxury product, and to sell it as a luxury product, use technology so that it can be authenticized that yes, it is luxury. And I think we should be able to address this issue. That's my way of looking at, let's say, probably integrating technology to solve the dilemma about, let's say, artisanal and.
Right. Thank you, Jana sir. I think a very well noted point, which you said. Let's not compete with Parloom. Rather, I'll say, let it be handloom, and let's be proud of how much handloom can produce. Probably the limited production can be the USP again to take it to the luxury market. We don't need to produce bulk. Any other panel member would like to give your view in this regard? On this topic? Yes. Yes, Hema.
Prabir raised a point on the authenticity of handloom. I totally agree on this, and I would like to tell you that Khaloom is working with the government of Karnataka for a So they are going to validate that the fabric is actually produced on handloom, and we are doing a pilot project with them, and they will, like, if there is a label, and when you scan the label, the customer knows whether it is produced on handloom, who is the weaver, and they get the entire process. So I totally agree with him that this is an issue based on the younger generation not taking it up because of the value, I mean, what they are paid. And again, if everyone makes a commitment to pay these weavers what they are actually worth, I think we'll really go a long way in getting the younger generation to take up this skill. So of course, productivity, I totally agree with you, Prabhu. There is no comparison between a power loom and
do that. Yeah.
handloom, I think, completely.
I
Rashmi,
completely agree with the fact that it has to be limited edition because that is a unique product. Our experience has been that if the weavers and the children are trained properly, as not just as a weaver, but as a designer, and understanding and creating a kind of unique value in what they make, the fabrics do sell. I mean, so I have known so many weavers' children because the weaver has learned how to sell his product, how to create markets with the help of other agencies. That the children see the potential there and they do join. But it is something that that there has to be a design input, there has to be a marketing input, creating a USP, and then make it more acceptable as a unique products, because we are never going to compete with the power loom if it is a normal kind of a product. The second thing, one of the initiatives that Gujarat is taking, they are connecting, like what Dr. Jana has been saying, they are connecting tourism with these handloom producing areas. And they are sort of linking up the tourism, textile tourism tours, where you can go to those units. And lots of Indians do it, not just the foreigners, because we all like to go and see the places. So they do special tourism tours where they go there, they see the product, they see how it is being made, and there's a kind of a whole respectability and connectivity that gets developed. And the whole handcrafted fabric gets a huge boost in its value chain, and people learn to make it as well, depending upon which units they are in. So there are so many different ways that we can actually add to the value of the handcrafted and really put it on a pedestal.
True.
It's nice.
And also what I feel about the point on the industry made products or commercially made products are relatively expensive. See, one of the things to be also taken into account is that most industries are not paying their environmental cost at all. I know of at least 2 units. I visited a few of the big factories. I'll give you an example of 2 units that are discharging 2,800,000 liters of water per month into the ocean. Water in a water deficient area. So when we look at if the industry is obliged to pay the environmental cost, this issue of cheap and expensive will be finished, because their product will be 5 times more expensive. They are getting away with creating an environmental disaster. And we are creating a market for such products, actually. If the consumer decides not to buy because of XYZ reasons, the company will be obliged to change. This is where we should be putting our energies. Our buying choices will create the change. Secondly, about handloom, see, handloom capacity as employer in the country. If the looms are functional the whole time, the amount of handloom we can produce is not funny. It will probably take away most of the industrial sector production, because we are not able to market what's produced on a handloom. As this whole, the current narrative is handloom is not expensive. It has actually paid for its entire environmental cost by the time it reaches the consumer. So if you put it at par, it might be even cheaper, but we are not looking at that. Second is, handloom is encouraging us to buy long lasting, good quality. Instead of 20, we buy only 5, like we were doing before. Our current consumption patterns have no excuse. by creating more markets, we are not serving any purpose because we are still contributing to the fashion waste. We have to change our consumption habits, then only. So for me, that's become a very important point these days, that we want to sustain the industry, but we are also buying less. Then where should we put our money? We should put our money with something that will last me maybe 15 years. Maybe I can give it to my daughter, So, there's a saying, I'm too poor to buy cheap things because I have to keep on buying them again and again. Whereas if I buy once, it stays with me. So this is what we should be emphasizing. And again, as all of you have mentioned and emphasized too, that handloom and powerloom cannot be on the same table. Comparing, sheep and goat, it's not going to work because none of the parameters match. There has to be some commonality to match anything. The whole principle also is like authenticity we were talking about earlier. How do we know it's handloom? How does a consumer know it's handloom? So I think asking the relevant questions, in whose pocket the profit is going. The reason we are in a mess is because we have created this top-down singular structure, which is taking away the entire, surplus of a business. So unless we can think of more than ourselves, we won't move towards sustainability. It will just remain to change. There is no third person who has to change. So that's where I think we all will need to. It's a difficult one, no? To say that we don't want to produce and market too much, but at the same time, we want to sustain handloom. So somewhere, a balance has to be created. It's a difficult one. I also am struggling with it. But yeah.
If I'm not wrong with the numbers, I think we have 2.5 million looms.
Yeah.
And what do we do with that if we don't produce again? I think we have to strike a balance, definitely. Dana sir, to you again. If you could touch upon some of the technological upgradation that are available for the handloom sector.
Okay.
Two of them at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, because I think there are a lot of efforts happen because of the government interventions, and also there are, I will say, not much private because of the government interventions. There are a lot of from the textile institutes options, but mind it, because of what was my first comment, that our technological interventions were all targeted towards producing more, which I have in principally I do not agree. So I will say that what exactly I'll just list down, because there's some the recent Northeast policy, because in Northeast there are a lot of let's say handloom, this especially there is a policy they have listed down actually an open document which says providing motorized jacquard in the existing handloom, providing the take up motions and let up motions on the existing handloom, using multiple box, let's say making fabric with multiple types of weft, twin cloth weaving mechanism, then let's say proxy drawbee, then warping drum, to because there are some kind of technologies we need to actually, out of this we need to probably filter out, because see there is no end. Gradually the moment you try to, because I have against this multiple box, because the moment you are going into that, you are going into very closer to the power loom. Now then how the people will say, where you draw, let's say balance a line. So my approach is, or my take is, rather than concentrating the technology to upgrade or let's increase the productivity, let's look at how we can make probably something which is also sustainable. For example, suppose nobody has actually given anything. Handloom means they think it is loom, and all the list what is there, all are targeted towards that in improving the productivity in the loom. Obviously, which is, see, and when the suggestions are coming from colleges, see, I am also textile engineer. We also probably, some of us know. So we'll try to make it little more, because what I have learned, I know that this is the loom can work with this attachments and this facilities. And then when I was asked to give a, let's say, concept paper, I will try to do that. But rather the government say, okay, no, let's not improve. It should be, run with a pedal. I also try to, let's say, give a strong argument on the why it should run with a pedal. So before that, now let's say rather target probably the technology improvement to make their other unaware, challenges. Like we know that they are probably sitting in a posture which is not, let's say, good, which we called in the industrial term ergonomics. Now, if I improve their ergonomics, because a lot many cases what they know that this particular profession is associated with some body injuries, which generally happens over a period of time. So these are also non-continuation of the profession also linked with that. Like we know that a lot of textile, let's say the people who used to work in the textile mill, because of the loose fiber which used to go into the lungs, because of that lot of new generation, the father says to the son, never work in the textile mill because of that. Improve the technology towards that rather than producing more. Let's not produce more. Second, no, I have not seen any effort in terms of, because handloom is not only gray fabric. Obviously, they are dying. Now, who is addressing that? How they are dying? Obviously, they will be dying and polluting the nearby streams, water streams. That all this discussion about Kitex moving from Kerala to doing that. Now, Kerala, we know it's a pristine land. We know that it is not good for manufacturing. Nobody talked about industrial environment in Kerala. Now, probably, I do not know what is the story, but Kitex, when they move out, Kerala government is saying that yes, they are spoiling or let's say polluting the water stream. That's the reason they are asked, they are investigated, and which Kitex did not like and move out. So same thing is going to happen if I need to sustain let's say a craft or a handloom. Suppose in somewhere in a pristine land in Himachal, I need to probably give them a technology where they can die without any residue. Now government should give that. Technology is available, which will make probably 10 times costly, but let it be. But then only the sustainable thing is going to happen. That means they will be able to sustain. Otherwise, what is going to happen? The moment it will come to the limelight, moment they become little big, till it is very small, micro level, little bit of, let's say, let's say pollution, which does not get detected. The moment it will become little prominent, somebody will raise this thing and then they will vanish because some, let's say environmentalist is going to raise this. So we should probably look at those kind of angles rather than producing more out of the, let's say handloom, making the speed better, making this better, that better. Then the uniqueness goes. I cannot then, let's say put a handloom and it is made by hand and taking 14 days to do that. It should be like that. So, and sustainability, another aspect which probably sounds very, strange, and I generally, tell generally controversial things. Now, we know that a lot of countries, let's say Denmark, Scandinavian countries, their number of cycles are more than the cars in the road. Okay, and we all know but we don't do anything about it. Now, why handloom is probably it's, let's say, father is working on the handloom or mother is working on the handloom. Because by the way, I think I have just read some % of the adult weavers are female. So when I see that my parents are doing that, I see that a lot of, let's say physical struggle. That means there is a physical strain. Now, obviously, I will say, I don't want to get into that profession because I want to get something better probably. So that means there is something. Now, obviously, train and driving car is a very luxury. So but now we are saying, no, we have driven too much of car, we need some exercise. I'm saying that looms can be exercise machines. Now, and we have done a project, not exercise machine by the way, but we have done a project. Like there are also some areas as we have seen that light is a issue. That means they don't have electricity. So in the night, they cannot actually weave. We did a project in terms of that moving parts of the loom actually is generating electricity to light a bulb. So that at least, so that means it is a self-sustainable. That means I am not using electricity. I do not know, depending on which sector of the country where they will have, let's say so much of sunlight or whatever. Obviously, those kind of technology, whether I do solar, which is individual level possible. Let's say the air is at that level difficult, because air has to be has to be in the to do air turbine. But solar in the individual level, every small weaver can actually put that. Or like I'm saying that probably while I'm actually running the loom, its moving part actually is generating electricity and then lighting a bulb, and the moment I stop the weaving, it's gone. We need to look at those kind of intervention. Technology life easier, making a whole circle. So within that cluster, they are able to sustain.
Yeah.
Rather than coming out, and because technology is available, but only we need to direct the technology to those aspects, and then actually we need to believe that yes, this is what. That's my take. That's the reason I'm saying that I'm not let's say I'm not very robust on handloom, but my take is sometimes very controversial. But I look at this way, that it has to be like that. Otherwise, I think we'll keep doing the things. There'll not be any end to it.
Yeah. Staying also the
and one more, I think I'll just responding to Rashmi's and Hema, this thing, that the authenticity issue currently, like we know that all those organic foods, okay, I think we are in the last leg of that fad of organic food. Now we know what we take it is a pinch of salt, whether to believe or not. So tag is tag. Now, even if whatever I write on the tag, it is based on trust. There is no physical proof that it is actually originated. You need to understand this difference between actually physically establishing. See, I can say it is a country A2 cow milk, ghee, and because of costly, that's fine. I trust the brand, I do it. Against that, probably I have a measuring device. I dip into the ghee or milk, and I trust myself that yes, this is this. Just like you check with AccuCheck your glucose level in that house. This thing is going to increase, and the technology is available. We need to only embrace. This is going to be more, but these are the ways to probably market. We have to say that yes, in the store, if we say yes, I'm selling handloom, and this is the proof, this is the way I'm checking that yes, it is 100% alpaca or 100% merino, and it is, you are not believing on any tag. Tag is after some time, we all know that saying. Now
that can calculate it.
Yes.
No,
yes.
I'm going to interrupt here. The tag is not going to tell you that it is a handloom. It needs to be scanned by the buyer. It is more for the buyers to have a validation, and they see the entire process which is into it. But as far as Khaloom is concerned, we don't need the tag because we are trusted.
Thanks for its trust.
That's what I'm saying. Right now there is trust.
Yeah.
But because like we know, once upon a time when I think I was just in early stage of my career, so Levi's has came for a talk for our students interview. One question was asked, who is next competitor in jeans? What was his answer? Fake Levi's. That is the next competitor.
That's right.
So you need to understand that so the fake industry is so large. Louis Vuitton knows there are a lot of fake. Adidas knows there are a lot of fake, but they can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan.
Sorry.
Yes. Now, Rashmi, with your vast hands-on experience in rural India, in the area of reviving traditional hand spinning and hand weaving to cultivation and extraction of indigo pigment, what do you think? Are technology and tradition, productivity and artistry, uniqueness in every piece, and standardization inevitably opposed? Your take on this, Rashmi?
Yeah. See, I don't think tradition and technology are opposed to each other, because as a human civilization, we have seen our evolution from making fire with flint and to where we are today. So we have been great with innovation and appropriation of a technology when it makes our life easier. But the filter is our intelligence. See, one is technology that is given to us, and one is technology developed to support what we are doing. So we should have technology as the servant, not the master. where Malka is a very good example of it, where they have created technology that serves short staple local cotton to create a fabric that goes back to the roots of cotton, for example, the way it was processed. And they've created a good market. But in this case, technology was serving the raw material. The raw material was not serving technology. So whenever we have a centralized production system, by inference, we are creating a situation where we have to obey what this large structure is doing. So let me give you some examples here. For example, why is this company discharging 2,800,000 liters of water in the ocean? Because their semi-treated water cannot be cleaned completely. Why can't it be cleaned completely? Because policy-wise, they are instructed to use 10 chemicals on their product to be able to sell it overseas. Who's making policy? Part of the people sitting on the policy board are industrialists who are manufacturing the chemical. We need to understand all this. So who is telling you to use 10 chemicals? When I'm making a woolen product at home, I'm not using 10 chemicals, but you are obliging somebody to do this to serve an industry which is producing a toxic chemical. So to also add on to what Jenna was saying, see, our work has been very specifically around processes which are sustainable. If we want to set up a livelihood story in remote Himalayan villages, that is a very fragile ecosystem, we can't be responsible for any kind of pollution of soil and water at all. So right at the beginning, the first thing we did was we only chose natural dyes, only. Within that also, we now only use alum. You know, you can say natural dyes and you can use heavy metal mordants in it, like tin and chromium and stuff like that. That doesn't make it right, you know. Natural dye means something which can be recycled. So in our institution, the way the textile production happens is we live on rainwater 10 months a year. We collect about 800,000 liters of rainwater. That is used for textile processing and everything else for a community of 40 people. Entire wastewater is recycled to grow vegetables and dyes. I am eating those vegetables, which means any effect of pollution is coming directly on me. But usually our cycle of production is so far away from us, it will be some small village in Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Bengal that is being pollution of our genes, or in China. We are so far away from that pollution that we don't care as consumers. Now, if I were to tell you that we are importing 900 tons of synthetic indigo from China per month, all your jeans are made with synthetic indigo. And synthetic indigo, by the process of production, is made with petroleum derivatives and very toxic chemicals to arrive at the chemical composition of natural indigo. The cost is 1/20th or even 1/30th of natural indigo. And we happily pay the 1/30th cost thinking we are wearing indigo. The second pollution happens when we actually use that indigo to dye. We are again using harmful chemical to dye. So what we are wearing on our skin, the skin is the largest organ in our body. Entire absorption is taking place by the fabrics that we wear. Toxins just don't arrive from the sky pattern. So first thing was natural dyes, second was water, third was energy. One, we use very little energy, electricity in the whole process. Whatever it is, we try to make it with renewable sources. So we have solar powered charkhas. We use solar energy for running the machine. We also produce electricity from pine needles, from the leaves of pine trees. So that electricity is used in larger machines like calendering and so on and so forth. But technology, if we increase the usage of energy in a small scale industry, we are again creating a dependency. Whereas a small, what we call a village enterprise, uses so little energy that a weaver can be totally independent of any larger system and still produce beautifully. we can't break that, because half the time we have no understanding of what we are breaking. My contention these days is that as urban people, our entire link production with earth, with people, is broken down to a technological solution always. Now imagine that, I'm just saying, if I talk to a 70-year-old woman in Delhi who has actually handled handmade pashmina, and if I show her a product today, she doesn't need a tag to know that,
Yes.
because she's a user of that beautiful product. Her brain and her eyes have been trained from childhood to see beautiful handloom. She herself is a connoisseur. But if we just rely on the tagging, then we are taking away our responsibility. It is important. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying education system has broken us from our own intelligence and evaluation. We don't know what handloom looks like. So it needs to be integrated from childhood. Then only we can find a solution.
I agree, Rashmi. Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. And Rashmi, that's quite an insight. And more you to empower many more.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now, Hema, I mean, I really wanted to understand the mission of Khalum with recycled yarns and what it stands for.
Yeah, Janali. Okay, so Khalum stands for sustainability, and at Khalum, high-end sustainable fabrics from recycled yarns on handlooms. So we are a social and environmental startup, and we have been supported by the Dutch government in this endeavor. And the factory is in Bangalore, but the support is from the Dutch government. So the social and environmental impact comes from the fact that recycled yarns, we are putting textile waste into use, which would otherwise end up in the landfills or the seas. And there is no, and we're also conserving water because there is no dyeing involved because it's again the recycled, waste yarns. And with since we are weaving on handloom, there is no energy. There is no carbon emission. So this is our environmental impact, which we are focusing upon. The social impact comes from the fact that we are employing mainly women weavers. We don't have gender bias, but we have more women weavers than male. And we provide them a fair standard living wage. We give them a safe, healthy, clean environment. I'm stressing on the clean and also take care of, we ensure that they have the ESI, the PF, and all the benefits which we can give them, even during COVID for hospitalization and anything what we could provide. So and in this process, since we are weaving on handloom, we are trying to preserve the art of handloom. We pay a fair standard wage. These weavers are more than happy to train their children, and their children are happy to take up this profession because they know they can support themselves if they have companies like us who are going to take care of them. So I think the need of the hour is there should be more companies like us who are going to take care of people like them, pay them a fair wage, ensure that they have a safe environment and clean environment. We also take care of them while working by giving them caps for their hair. I think Prabir spoke about that. We give them earplugs. We are providing them masks because we work with recycled cotton. So obviously there's a lot of fluff going around. We have removing the fluff, out of the factory, ventilated rooms, fans, tube lights, everything. So that, it's an occupational hazard, but we need to take care of it. We give them breaks, 2 tea breaks, they take rest, good time for lunch, so things like this. And a lot of feel like they're part of the family at Khalum. They identify with what they're weaving with us, and they're proud to be a part of Khalum and weaving for us. So our mission is this, that we try to ensure hand weaving stays. We encourage the younger generation. We have a social impact. We have an environmental impact. And and we weave very high-end fabrics, which has been validated by the international market as well as the domestic market. So I think, I don't know whether Rashmi or Prabir made a point. See, regarding the weaving, recycled yarns has its own inherent characteristics. It is not as per me, you cannot weave it on a shuttless loom because the strength is like that. And power loom also, it is possible, but it has its limitations. But on a hand loom, we preserve the inherent look of the recycled yarn and we create a beautiful fabric. We ensure the processes are in place, whether it's in winding, warping, or pern winding. We ensure that there is a proper way to deal with the yarn, a knot, way to make the warp in a proper way, so that while weaving, the faults are minimal. So if you control these processes, and the weaver also is trained to know how to weave without stressing the fact that, oh, I need 10 meters of fabric a day. It's more the quality which has to be important. You give them adequate training, and then you have a fabric which is really good and received well. We had the Dutch minister who endorsed our fabric, and they have seen that it is good and you can wear it. And one last point I will make, Janali, these
Yes.
fabrics can be recycled again 3 to 4 times minimum.
Thanks, Emma. And now I would like to hear from Salini the story of Moral Fiber. What makes the fabric manufacturing unique in this era of global warming and climate change? Shalini, if you could take us through your story.
I come from freedom fighter families, and I think you can see her photograph at the back. She worked with Gandhi, and she was involved with protesting for foreign mill-made fabrics and promoted the Swadeshi. And that movement was started by Gandhiji, and she was one of the young. She believed that khadi, the whole khadi story is about creating that tremendous amount of strength in this cotton yarn that could really stand against the power of the mills and the British rule. So it is an amazing story by itself. And that connected at that time thousands of people, and they all learned to spin themselves and wore nothing but khadi. And they did fire of all the Videshi goods and clothes and everything. And people started working. And again, khadi became a kind of a symbol of Svavlamban, Swatantra, freedom, equality. And those principles really were driven, had driven the independence movement. And my aunt set up the first khadi shop in Ahmedabad. So like khadi was like in my DNA, but I sort of didn't really do much about it. I became an architect, and I was practicing here, I was practicing abroad. But back from a few years ago, and my specialization has been energy efficiency. And living abroad, I knew what the fair trade was, and what the climate change issues are there. And because being an architect, I was addressing all those issues anyway. So I decided to take up the khadi when I came back, and I realized that the fabric making, I think we are probably the only place where still like the process of converting cotton into fibers, into fabric and all of that by hand without using any electricity is available. Not many countries still have that technology. So we are unique in that sense. And in India, khadi played a very significant role, not just in India, also internationally. So the fabric was amazing, everything. But I realized that the way it was being sold, the way it was being marketed, the kind of designs that they had, did not really do any justice to that amazing fabric that was. So I decided that I'm not going to go on the emotional value of Gandhi and independence and all that. So we decided that we were to say our main slogan was that moral fiber fabrics free the environment from pollution and depletion and free people from poverty. And that really this fabric with the contemporary issues that we are all dealing with, because khadi is almost carbon neutral. We also now do the ESV, that is environmental saving values for each fabric. It is a kind of a whole mathematical technical process where we get the ESV established. But we say that if there is a 100% cotton shirt, khadi uses only 9% of electricity. So there is no carbon footprint almost. So we thought that all these amazing value, and you know, work done by hand. I think it's so tremendous, the value that it brings in, especially now that the whole world is going towards IT and robotics and all of that. Working with mind and brain, and you know, I would say dancing fingers and eye. It's beautiful imagery, beautiful work, and people do value it even more and more. The international market for handcrafted is becoming bigger and bigger. But these has to be presented properly. This has to be talked about properly. This has to be come up to the kind of quality to the international standard. Otherwise, all this just remains kind of a words or kind of a thought. So we did a tremendous amount of, we call our fabrics next generation khadi, because we do tremendous amount of design input, technical input, create a kind of fabric that is beautiful in touch and feel. And started in E-Trade. Again, you know, we were very carbon neutral conscious. So most of the production happened within 250 kilometers from where we are. So we were reducing the carbon miles. And we were very much like promoting the local or upgrading even the skills of the local artisans rather than going forward. And we started cooperative. We didn't really want to build any factory or something. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. But we really started with the existing cooperatives, whoever really wanted to work. So all the design and technical input that we gave, it was just kind of presented. We were not like, you know, having any kind of a monopoly or anything. Whatever they learned from us, they can share it with other people, or they. So that is how the whole story started. And it so happened that
if you could also touch upon the sacred economy in terms of handloom.
yes,
Really
yes,
want to hear
sure,
about
sure,
that too.
sure.
Yeah.
So and it was an e-business. We didn't want to do. It was just an email website, and we realized that 80% initially came from abroad, because I think what we were talking about, that's the chord, and that's how we started exporting in about 18 different countries. And so everything that got involved, it was a tradition, but it was handcrafted, it was carbon neutral, but the fabric itself had a tremendous amount of magic because it is made by hand. And all of that put together, the whole thing work. And of course, now we sell it here, we sell it abroad. And now we also do the complete circularity, that everything that is left of the fabric, we run a group, two groups. One is called Puna, and the other one is called Sarthak, where we use the fabric waste and turn that into jewelry and bags and mats, where from fiber to attire to fiber, the whole complete cycle. Now, I don't know whether you know, but Prasanna ji from Karnataka, he was a thespian. He used the word sacred economy. And that sacred economy has come about because people like us who have in ethical value that the handcrafted brings in, but somehow the government has forgotten, or have not really understood or paid that much attention to the handmade. That was the third pillar of our economy historically, and that has all been forgotten or not really paid attention to. So the what is described as it utilizes minimum of 60% of human labor, 60% of local raw material, and not more than 40% of automation, and not more than 40% of imported raw materials. We have something like 40 million artisans. Hang on, I have a detail somewhere. 40 million people who are working on handcrafted sector, including fabrics. And we have a huge young force that is coming up. Handcrafted fabric, despite what everybody says, it does give work to thousands of people. And if it is done in a kind of ownership manner, the people who take the ownership of do, and they become a part of the production rather than just become a labor force, it could become a very strong force for us to go forward. And that is what we are promoting very highly, that we believe that now, again, we talk about innovation. We use solar energy for running the loom, the charkhas and all that. We use completely natural dyes and all that, which does not pollute. But at the same time, we also do a tremendous amount of regular work in improving the quality. And quality is the final thing. If you have the quality, and nobody can say that the handcrafted less in any way. They are even more superior than power loom or anything if done right and presented well. So that is what we stand for. And I think even in the future, we believe that the handcrafted is going to be more and more valued, because we are in today's highly polluting, highly consumerist, wasteful society. The handmade is going to really take us forward. So we are
Thanks,
actually
Shalini.
turning a full circle. We were great for handcrafted, and I think the handcrafted is going to save us at the moment.
Thanks, Shalini. A great insight, and thanks for the input. So I think we are written. We can go on for another 15-20 minutes here. Because Janasa mentioned about Levi's, and I just remember the slogan which says "Buy better, wear longer." You know, that's what Levi's stands for, I guess. So today, the way we consume, so change for better and sustainable future. So with this, I open this question to all the panel members here. What would you say today? So, I mean, yes, any one of you can take it forward. About the consumption, the way we consume, the way we, I mean, do we insist on buy better, wear longer? Yes.
Yeah, generally for me, with the younger generation, I think has to be on slow fashion and circular fashion. So, I mean, with the slow fashion, I think Rashmi spoke about it, and I understand that, like, we have to be thoughtful and intentional. We have a tendency to keep buying stuff. We buy a lot of clothes, and I don't think anyone wears their garments for 5 years or 10 years. To slow down that process, actually, so that we avoid this mindless consumption and excessive production of fabrics and garments. That would be one. And with the and also focus on circular fashion, because with circular fashion we try to keep the fabrics and garments in use for a long time, which means we're reusing and recycling. And so I think this focus, if the younger generation has, I think it will go a long way to save the planet and the environment, and to reduce the waste and the environmental impact.
Rashmi, your take on this?
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would recommend is appreciation for hand skills in the young people, right? Very few of the young people now produce anything tactile, you know? There's a lot of work on technology. So appreciation comes when you yourself make something. If they knit one hat, the argument with an artisan about why the product is expensive or not, 50% will be tackled. So one is to become producers and not only consumers of beauty or whatever it is that we are doing. And the second is to ask the relevant questions. Whenever you make a buying choice, how it is made, where it is made, who makes it. That will help you to decide if it's a product to buy. I think these two are good.
Shalini?
When I speak, I speak a lot with talk a lot with the students and interact a lot with them. And there is one exercise that brings to mind. I always ask that you must have been living with your grandparents, or you clothes did they own? And they would say, well, so many, 4 pairs, 6 pairs, 10 pairs. I said, how many clothes did your parents own? And then they say a certain number. And I said, how many clothes do you own? And most of them have never really thought of it, and they really get shocked. And then we sort of start the discussion about why are we buying more? We all have the same body. I mean, if we don't have two faces and two bodies and 4 legs or anything like that. So why do we need to have more? So that was a fundamental thing. And then we talk about how our psyche is brainwashed by this whole heavily consumerist society, and about wearing more, looking. And then we start with that, and then we talk about being conscious of what you do, and make a conscious wearer and conscious chooser. And then we say that, look, our fabric is made here, so whatever that we do, we are spoiling our Mother Earth. And what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to keep our artisans? They're all our neighbors. They are not coming from anywhere else. So how would you like to live on this earth? And then we talk about being a conscious buyer, conscious, and make all the conscious lifestyle choices. And then we talk about uh, buying, and the whole difference between choosing and buying. The what are you choosing, and where that effect is going to go. And I just would like to share that with all the students who are watching and everybody else, because I think once that kind of a thought process we all take on for everything, for all the choices that we make in our lives, I think we will be a much human, and we will not be brainwashed or being used by this whole commercial, greedy commercial forces that is all around us. We need to really come out of it, and we need to be our own person who make our own selection, who rather than being forced by what everything else is happening to us.
Thanks, Eleni. And Jana sir, over to you.
Yeah, I think I will go by, because I am just very, very passionately, listening to the passion and emotion of, all three panelists, And I think I will take again a rebellious position in this group. Okay, now let's say, because I was hearing about the Hema when she was saying, if it is, was it a Dutch funded, this thing is a Dutch funded kind of project, or something, it is a self-sustainable?
It was started by a company, by a venture builder.
Okay.
So Haloom is started by NBU with a venture builder, and they.
But now it is self-sustainable.
No, it is not yet self-sustainable. It will reach self-sustainability in 6 months.
I think that's what is the key, because I'm not pointing out anything. See what is happening today. I will come back to journalism for this young generation, because I have again a different take on that. But let's see what happens is, we are the largest in terms of handloom in the world. We have some figures says 80% of the handlooms are there. So many second largest, let's say, employee generation. So obviously we cannot ignore. But the fact is, subsidized or supported by the ministry. That's the reason it's still alive. Otherwise, it could have been dead, to be very frank. Because a lot of other countries, those are dead, but because they could afford to make it die. But in our country, probably we cannot afford to make it die because of the huge population involved. Now, second, if we need to make it self-sustainable, start with this, but it has to come back to its own business model. And because of that, some figure says that the basic price has to be 3 times. And that's where I said that it has to be bidded as a luxury product, period. Because otherwise it cannot self-sustain. It can only be funded for some time. The moment the fund goes, then it will just fall apart. So it has to be, so we need to sell it at 3 times. Now, second, this thing is, what is the message? I actually really like the word brainwashed by Shalini and the word used tactile by Rashmi. I think these two are very important element in this bringing up this new generation. See, what is the way I see, because today I think one statistic says that young generations are more environmentally aware than the older generation. See, this has happened because of the education system. And that's where I think I really like this Rashmi's idea about, we can actually in the education system build some, at least 1 or 2 subjects. See what has happened. When I studied, I did not have any, I'm 54 plus, by the way. Now I did not study any subject called environmental studies in my time. But when I see my son, they are, because they have been ingrained. Now I really like Rashmi's idea. Something can be, let's say, introduced where they will feel, and I really feel that when they have done it something, they have felt something, then they will be able to probably, which is again kind of brainwashing, or you call hand washing, whatever it is. But it is, otherwise you cannot. Otherwise, all we passionately and emotionally talk about this in webinars, and this young generation will go out, just end up this webinar and buy something again from the mall, and just that's all. Because see, it is very easy to say reduce, but see, all these multinationals. See, if you need to bring multinationals into this forte, that's what also again another idea, and it's not my idea, by the way. I think some of you know, last year, our textile minister actually has called all the 4 top retailers of our country and asked them to introduce a khadi collection or handloom collection, whatever you see. So all these Raymonds and all this thing, their collection, you see, this is a kind of, because we need to see that. And also one more statistic says that handloom product are generally unstitched in terms of, let's say the last product which is consumed. Now, in terms of pattern, unstitched product percentage is as less than 10%. That means I'm saying that the more buying power what you have, so that we call this our demographic dividend, the age group. So if we can actually bring them into this fold, so either we have to convert some to stitch product, which is product diversification. We need to see that how to be done, keeping the quality in matter, and that's why these big brands are roped in. Or we need to do the brainwashing, or whatever washing you can say, this young generation to buy the, because if you see in their wardrobe, what unstitched product they can have, a let's say boy and a girl, except a stole. I don't see anything for a boy, and for probably this chunni or whatever, everything is stitched. The moment problem is the fabric, handloom fabric, as long as it is a fabric, it is super. But if it is a stitched by not good quality or good, I think in the women segment, still there are a lot of good brands which are actually giving good stitched product. But in the men's category, I don't see any brand like W or whatever which is set up so well in the women's sector. If I need to buy a, let's say, kurta for myself, actually before this seminar, I was wearing a kurta and sitting for this, because I know that all of you will be wearing a handloom product. But then I decided, no, it doesn't look very nice, because I don't have a branded, that famous brands which are actually selling that good quality kurta, because it's still stitched by some tailor somewhere. This, I think, need to be, one is brainwashing this young generation. Yes, I don't know how much this reduction is going to work. That means reduce your consumption, that means buy less, because they are continually bombarded by the multinational to buy more, and another group is saying buy less, and where they will go, how they will go, everything depends on how you can influence. But I think if you can make them consume or buy something handloom product, if today their percentage is X, if you can increase into X plus delta X, that is going to probably create some changes. And that I'm not very sure, I'm not an expert how to do that, whether brainwashing, whether bringing some good product in the market, what they like, or I don't know, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Point taken. I think we have to make our menswear designers, the students, to take this point very seriously. And
I don't know, because that's I don't find, let's say, I think the same situation was 10 years before, yes, for the women's segment.
I think our women's sectors are really doing good, and yeah, I think there's no.
Say something here for a second.
Yes, you can. I think I would. We can have another 1 minute each, one of you probably, and we actually know. I think we would like to, anybody to take up the concluding session here now, because I wish to take up 2-3 questions if I have from the audience.
Okay, so I would just like to respond to one thing Mr. Jena was saying. Is just to give an example, that the enterprise that we've set up in the Himalayas is owned entirely by producers and has been self-sufficient for the last 15 years in a very, very remote area. It employs it employs 14 managers, administrative and other work, and their salaries are paid out of sales in addition to the wages of 2,200 families. So
we need to create more
it was a
self-help groups or whatever, and they should be self-supporting, and they should be making a lot of money. I'm not capitalist, but they should be making. They should not be comparing that I'm making less money and making more money. Then it is not sustainable. They should be, and we should be like, I think I will take this Levi's this thing. the handloom product should say that, you know, our biggest competitor is fake Levi, a fake handloom. Then we reach the, I think, pinnacle. That means everybody wanted to wear the handloom.
Yes, Rashmi, you were telling something.
Yeah. Also, Jana ji, I mean, the market for sustainable and handloom is increasing. I mean, Halloum is only 3 years old, but in the last 1 year, in spite of COVID, our looms have been full. That is a very promising sign
Yes,
for us
yeah.
to know that people, and especially, I mean, I'm saying that the younger generation, younger designers are reaching out to us to buy fabrics, to create their collections, and do a lot of things with that. So I think there's a lot of potential for handloom and sustainability.
That's a really good sign. Yes.
Yeah, it's a very good sign.
Can we move on to the questions? I mean, any questions from the audience? Anybody? You can just unmute yourself, and then anybody, can I see any hand or any chat message? Anything? Any
Yes,
question?
there are.
Student?
There are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Hello, Janani, will you let me ask a question?
Yes. Sure, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. This is Adyasha. Hello.
Can hear you.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, I'm a designer, a freelance designer. I have worked as an artist, as a designer with DC Handicraft and Handloom. And I personally, I have felt a lot of difficulty working with artisans because they have this mindset that I myself am a NIFT graduate, and they have this mindset that NIFT don't know how to work with handlooms or anything. I faced a lot of difficulties just breaking the ice to work with them. So what would you suggest would be an icebreaker or a medium ground as to how we approach these artisans or how we start to work with them?
Anybody? Shalini, would you like to go for this? Or
See what?
yeah, Shalini, please.
I think you need to unmute yourself, Shalini.
You're muted.
Yes, Shalini, please.
When I started working with artisans, initially I had very similar issues. They felt that I had just come back from England, and they said, this lady coming from England, what does she know? She knows zero. So that is where the whole starting point was. And I would say the only thing that is to show how much you know. You have to sit down and learn and understand, maybe work with them, sit on the loom and work with them, sit on the, ask them question, whatever. I think at the end of all of that, I really believe that I learned a lot from them, and I managed to create a dialogue with them only when I sat down with them and I started working on the loom and I started working on a charkha. So I think that is where the connectivity starts, and there are no shortcuts. I don't think there are any shortcuts for that. And of course, there's a complete respect, complete sympathy. I have found so many cooperatives, sometimes even the designers, there is a kind of a superiority levels, which according to me, I think we just have a tremendous amount of respect for them. They are the ones who are going to be teaching us rather than we teaching them. And if you had that kind of a sympathy, respect, and ready to sit down with them, I have found only those things. I don't think there is any other magical wand that I had.
Thanks, Shalini.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think there's one more question. Yeah. Rashmi, please.
Yeah, I would agree with Shalini ji. See, because empathy and humility. Often what happens is when we have a degree, we think we know everything, because that's how we are supposed to project ourselves, not as learners, but as people who know everything. And that in principle puts a barrier between you and the weaver, because they actually know much more than you. If you were to sit with them, you will feel so humble that I even dared to say that I have a degree. They just don't articulate it. So unless you have that humility, the dialogue will not happen. And as Shalini ji is saying, there is no shortcut. You have to get off the pedestal in some ways of having a degree.
There's
Then only it
another
works.
question. There's another question. I'm taking few questions faster so that we can just cover.
Yeah, sure.
So this is from Rushali, an alumna of NIFT Bangalore. I am a textile designer working with khadi saris and fabrics. I'm facing some issues with marketing, how to get some good markets for my product.
My response has been that the product that you create, well, to put it in a nutshell, I think the markets have increased a lot more, and there are so many other options and openings than when we started, because all we had to do at that time to work with only khadi shops and try to place a product where we have to show the distinction, where we could see the distinction, but even the shopkeepers couldn't see the distinction, and then we had to take it from there. Now I think you have, according to me, or what I see around me, there are a lot more options. You can go online, you can buy, you can connect with anybody, because being on the e-market gives you that kind of a democratic right to be in par with everything. So if those kind of markets are explored, and then you work, I think once you be online and keep plugging in, tell the story, not the product. I think that's another one. Tell the story. Story is so much more important, and the khadi story or any of the handmade stories have a lot more value, and that will add a lot to the product itself or what you are trying to do. Because otherwise, why would you want to do it unless there is something that is a very strong burning desire in you? You wouldn't be doing any of that. So that is the kind of a way to go about it.
Thank you, Shalini. I think we have so many questions, but I have selected one more, one last, and rest I think we will put it up across to you. We will do through mails. We will complete this exercise, but okay, we have another. We have our director, ma'am. Ma'am, are you there?
Yeah, Janali, I'm here. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, panel, for this wonderful talk. I just wanted to pick your brain on one very pertinent point that I see among the youngsters. Most of them are into fast fashion, do not know the ill effects of it, but because they cannot afford, the clean energy ones, which tend to be, slightly higher price than this. So, and this is probably best answered by Shalini and Rashmi and all of them, that, how do we democratize this cost factor as far as, the garments are concerned, which are more sustainable and which are more conscious and more friendly to the environment? Thank you.
Can I take first?
Sure.
Yeah, because although I feel that for the younger generation, I think the money is not a problem, because again, one study shows that buying a cup of coffee for me, I'll think twice before entering the Starbucks. But I think the young generation enter more, because for them, as long as they can relate, and I think I like that somebody says the story. I think we need to create something with young generation. I think twice before entering, but I say I don't know whether they get the money from. Is it their parents, given money or their earned money? They do spend if they like. So we need to create Starbucks, not the let's say corner coffee shop. Corner coffee shop is for Aditya Birla to create, and you three guys will create a of probably handloom. So, and like there are, and somebody is given that example of tourism, and in fact NIFT also started. I think Jonali, probably you are also aware that NIFT also started actually along with that handloom this tourism plan for the international let's say students and international. So we need to create. Although I do not agree that we need to reduce cost, but yes, they need to be hooked onto this. They will go and buy. If they like, they will buy. And that I don't know what is that, how to make them like, but I don't think we need to reduce cost.
Yeah,
I
and
would say
also, sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, I don't think also that the fabrics are costly. I don't believe, because Khalum fabrics are not expensive. We are on par with that. It's expensive, and that's why they don't buy. I think they just need to have a more general awareness of what is the fabric, what they should be doing, and why they should buy these fabrics for them to reach out to these fabrics. I don't agree that they are more expensive.
I would like to say that there is a distinction between the price and the value. If you go into the shops, you get a kurta for 300 rupees, 1,000 rupees. You want to go Sabyasachi or something, you pay thousands of rupees. How do you put value to it? Price is different. What is of value? And that is where the distinction comes in. That we all don't go and buy the cheapest one. We go for what is a value for money. And the value for money has to be understood as how artisans, how it is supporting the environment, how it is creating dignity, and how it's supporting the Mother Earth. So those are the kind of values that are added. And once you put the value, then the price factor diminishes. I don't want to go too long about it, so I will allow other people to talk.
Yes.
Also the demystification, no, of a little bit, because what the ad says is not what is necessarily true.
Yeah.
So if they were to, since they are very tech savvy, they should do some Googling and try to find out, if this brand, I mean, most students who are studying in NIFT or any other large, well-known college have spent a lot of money on their education. And I see their clothes are more, they are buying Nike, Reebok, and all these are expensive brands. They are not like simple. I don't see them wearing Bata shoes, for example, which is a reasonably cheap brand, So it's a buying choice. It's not that they can't afford it. Madam, if you agree there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I do wear butter still.
Yes.
Talking of the younger people.
I think
We have since it's national. Yeah, cost is a factor. Cost is definitely a factor, not only for students, but also, let us say, a young professional who's in her early 20s or mid 20s.
Voice is breaking.
Yeah, voice is breaking. Can't hear you.
Tell me what she said about the value and also the demystification that you said. We should all educate and discuss about this more. That there is more to wearing denim than merely, Levi's and things of that sort, which may be under peer pressure, but there is a huge cost.
Can't hear.
Thank you so much for answering that.
I completely agree on the awareness part of it. Trust me. Yes, I think it really helps. I myself is, cultivating that habit, and I have started wearing more of handlooms just because probably, the environment talks about it now. I started appreciating it very late, but yes, I think awareness is one of the important factor here. And I think we can go on this, but we have come to the fag end of a session here now. Our takeaways probably, handloom is unique. So let's conserve it for their benefit and development. Let's not make it too cumbersome for them and too overwhelming so that they run away from what we say. So let's keep technology and things simple to them. We need to conserve our resources through circular economy, sacred economy, utilize the abundance of heritage and craft knowledge that we have. Respect the artisans and move towards the sustainable technologies. With this, we conclude this session on handloom, issues with sustainability, technologies, and innovations. I extend my heartfelt thanks to all the panel members for their meaningful insight here and keeping up beautifully with the timing. And to my audience for being so wonderful, listening so patiently, holding on to an afternoon session post lunch with 200 participants. That's, I think, is a big number. And to my audience, please hold on to the next session, another session for the last one, which we have, which is on online marketplace paradigm shift with the pandemic, which is going to start at 4:30 sharp. So signing off today now, this is Janali Bajpayee, the professor of NIFT Bangalore.